Welcome to Physiology Unraveled, the career series, where we explore different career paths within the biomedical field. I am your host, Jorge Granalos, here with my co-host, Dr. Joe Watto. Today, we're joined by Dr. Nathan Keller, a principal specialist physiologist at NASA. In this episode, Nathan walks us through the role that applied physiologists like himself play in keeping astronauts healthy in different extreme environments. But most importantly, we take a deep dive into Nathan's scientific journey and how he transitioned from his role as a high school science teacher into his dream job working at NASA. Nathan also breaks down the skills that matter the most outside of the classroom, such as communication, adaptability, gaining real-world experience. And he points out why it's okay if your career path does not follow a straight line. By the end of this conversation, you'll walk away with practical advice, encouragement, and a clearer picture of what skills are needed for those that are looking to pursue a career in physiology and space research. Let's jump into the conversation with Dr. Nathan Keller. I just want to let everybody know, if you're listening and you want to learn more insights on how to potentially land a job being a physiologist for NASA, you definitely want to stick around and listen to this episode. So Nathan, tell us a little bit of what it is that being a principal specialist physiologist for NASA means.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize, but most of the people that work for NASA aren't actually government employees. I think somewhere I've heard it between 15 and 30% at Johnson Space Center specifically. And I say Johnson because that's where I'm at in Houston here. And that's where a lot of the human spaceflight stuff goes down. There's the launch facilities, of course, in Florida, and there's a little bit of science that happens there and some of the other centers around the country. But the human spaceflight research is primarily happening with the astronaut crew down here in Houston. And so the majority of the folks that are there on site are actually contractors. I work for a company called KBR, who's based in Houston and is a huge company that goes all over the world and serves tons of government contracts and kind of its hands in lots and lots of pies. But they also have a whole branch dedicated to space. And so I work for them and they work for NASA. And of course, NASA works for the American people. But this was something that was done to kind of streamline the professional workforce of the U.S. government many years back. It was kind of the shift to contract work. And so that allows for the contractors to be a little more flexible than some of the civil servants in terms of moving people around and hiring and moving and shifting things based on the needs of different projects. So what I do specifically is something that I was well prepared for during my graduate school experience because I knew I was going into this. We don't just we do very little, which we'd consider pure science. It's mostly applied science, and it's specific to this human spaceflight world, what it takes to keep humans alive in space. And because NASA is the customer of the company that I work for, NASA says to us, we have this mission, we have this concept of our operations, and we need to know what's going to happen to somebody when they are at this pressure for this amount of time, and then we lower them to this pressure for this amount of time. What's going to happen to their body? What's the risk of really anything, a decrease in performance or injury to them or even death? It's a very risky enterprise, the whole thing is. And so the tolerance for not even just failure or mission loss, certainly the loss of crew, the tolerance for that is nil. But mission failure or compromise, it's very low. NASA operates on a shoestring budget and is asked to literally go to the moon with it. And so there's very little tolerances anywhere. And so it's just maximum safety, maximum performance, and trying to find the balance between those things all the time. And so what I do is very operational and very focused on answering specific human spaceflight questions. So my lab, you mentioned I'm in the biomedical research lab. Mm-hmm. My lab within that branch specifically deals with EVA, extravehicular activities, which is spacewalks. So what happens when you go from the big vehicle down to a spacesuit, which is really just a tiny person-sized vehicle, person-shaped vehicle, and then because it needs all the same things that your vehicle does to keep the person alive, and then you send them out into space to do either a spacewalk or a moonwalk on the surface of the moon, or eventually a Mars walk, on the surface of Mars. And everything that goes into all of that. And those are very different operations with very different suits with different needs and different research questions that go into it. And so given all of the parameters that go into everything, it takes somebody with a scientific research background to really just to buy down the risk and the uncertainty using statistical models, using evidence-based approaches, using just the different tools that scientists have at their disposal. So they hire folks like me to design a test that's going to look at answering some kind of question that's going to buy down some of our risk, some of the risk to our crew, as well as, again, just finding the balance of like performance and risk, like minimal performance, maximal risk. So that, did I say that wrong? I said that backwards. Maximal performance, minimal risk.
Yeah, there you go.
Unless you're in SpaceX, then it's the other way around. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's what I do.
That's funny. Very interesting. I've got so many questions. Since I know you a little bit, I've asked you a lot of these questions before, but I'll let Joe, do you have any questions since Nathan was not your roommate previously?
Yeah, I do. And I am very, very curious about a lot of those things. It sounds like what someone would probably just, if I were to say what I wanted to do in grad school, that sounds like a dream job to me, honestly.
It is. It is. I have my dream job. I make no bones about it. I love what I do. Very
So
blessed.
the question that I have is, we'll circle back to all the science in your career path, and I think people will be very interested in that. But for my personal curiosity, and maybe some others, could you tell us about the origin story between sort of how you two connected, and obviously becoming roommates, you must have known each other pretty well, and just
our story.
Yeah,
That's very
how you
romantic.
Yeah.
I had candles. You ready? Play some music? No, I'm just kidding. Well, it's great. So I'll tell my side of the story anyway. I came in as a non-traditional student. I graduated in 2023 with my undergrad, and I worked for 15 years as a lot of different things, just as fate would have it. The job that I had right before going to grad school was as a high school science teacher. And that I was able to use that experience to convince somebody to bring me on as a graduate student with a teaching assistantship to teach a biomechanics lab. And that, kind of the rest is history. So that biomechanics lab and that instructor was there at Texas A&M, and Jorge happened to be in the lab right next door. And I just happened to meet by happenstance the two graduate students that were in the process of leaving the lab that I was joining, and who already knew Jorge, and took great pity on me because I was coming into that lab by myself with no help. And so they took great pity on me and were showing me how to do things and introducing me to people like Jorge and some of the other folks in our cohort. And I actually, probably the biggest, if not, or well, one of the biggest and happiest surprises of the whole graduate school experience was just how welcoming all the grad students were in the kinesiology department at A&M. Like everybody, even though I was a non-traditional student, I never felt like an outsider. I never felt like that I wasn't welcome. And, anytime I had questions, somebody was there and had my back and had my support, and even would walk me through, Texas A&M is a big system, and there's just lots and lots of people you got to go through for lots of stuff. And Jorge was there and answered a lot of my questions. And so were just a bunch of other people because I just had a lot of questions. And so it was a great experience. And they invited me out to places, and Jorge and I got to be friends. And we eventually got a little place on Howdy Court. And it was great. Love that house. I miss it. It was a great house.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure you don't miss my dog.
I do really miss your dogs, actually. Nathan, do you think you would have stuck around, or maybe how much more difficult would it have been if you didn't have the support by like your other peers and things like as you were describing?
Yeah, there's no question. I without the support of certainly my peers, I don't think I would have succeeded. It was beyond invaluable. It was critical. So yeah, and what's so funny is it really was just a random happenstance that I happened to walk in when Pat was in there closing up shop in that lab, and I walked in and he looked at me and I looked at him and he was like, "Who are you?" And I said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm here to work." And he said, "I had no idea you were even coming." It was kind of a mess, but we figured it out thanks to him and you and Ayland and Dylan and just so many other people, Bree, and I could go on forever.
Yes,
Less than 20 people. So and by the end of it, I tried my best to also give back because it was given me. So when the new students came in, I had no problem, taking them to lunch and showing them the ropes and showing them around. That was extended to me, and I recognize exactly what you're saying, which is just how critical that is to everybody's success. And I don't know if that's by design or not, but I just felt like generally we're just kind of thrown in there and told to sink or swim, and we really depend on each other to stay afloat.
I agree 100%. And that's very important, I guess, for those that are listening. If you're thinking about going to graduate school, is really important, at least for my experience. I was Nathan's experience. I don't know, you, Joe, your community, how important that was, but yeah.
But yeah, critical. We always joked we were like the Avengers. I mean, maybe not as powerful on our own, but definitely when we were together, we can get some stuff done. Because there's a lot of
So
unknowns.
which Avenger were you?
I don't know. We never really got down to the details, but I think it was definitely a team.
The details are important. Come on. Black Widow. It's okay.
Probably Strange.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Doctor. Okay. You just wanted to be doctor without getting the PhD.
Definitely strange for sure.
And definitely, yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so Joe, that's bringing back a lot of memories with that. But yeah, Nathan and I had the opportunity, as I was on my way out, as I was finishing my PhD, to had the pleasure of being, Nathan's roommate, along with, it was a total of 5 of us. So full house, miss Nathan as a roommate, and definitely miss the cheap rent that we had at College Station compared to where I pay now. Yeah, but Nathan, I have a question going back to one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning, which was, the lab where you're at being more applied, really being applied physiology versus more of your traditional basic science or your bench lab work. So for those that may not be too familiar with the basic science versus applied science, can you give us a quick little breakdown on that? And then would you recommend somebody that's wanting to go into a role as a physiologist for NASA to really focus on trying to get more applied work versus more of the basic science bench work?
Yeah, I'll give you two kind of dimensions that you can go in here. So,
of course,
like you said, there's the basic science, which, don't get it wrong, like that doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that you're trying to answer a question. You're trying to know something that isn't known. You're trying to, for broadly speaking, in broad strokes, we don't know what are the effects of this on people, or if I apply this to this or mix these two things together, what's going to happen, just because it needs to be known. In my case, we are doing applied science because we know what we're trying to do and we're trying to answer a very specific question. And so the way you design your experiments is going to be very different based on whether you already have your application in mind. Then you can tailor your experiment to exactly what you have in mind. Whereas if you don't, and you're trying to be able to answer a broad question, then anybody can take that answer and then apply it to something else or to any number of more specific applications. That's extremely valuable and necessary. And I use basic science in order to inform my applied science study design all the time. And then within that, to answer your kind of more specific question about sort of tailoring it to NASA, and if you're trying to be a contractor at NASA and sort of answering these applied questions, there are ways to do research that is not very specifically human-answered research. So, for example, there's plenty of animal studies that are done on the International Space Station that answers questions about microgravity and the effects of microgravity on physiology. There's lots of cell studies that are done where they have these really cool, like, zero gravity contraptions that just kind of apply vector in all directions, and it just sits there and spins randomly and just sort of generally applies a zero gravity, where it's like a net zero gravity vector on the cells. And so they try to get it like the real kind of cellular answer of things. But none of those labs exist at NASA. So if you want to, if your goal is to go be at NASA, you're not going to be doing very much. I say none. There are certainly no animal studies at NASA. There might be some cell studies in the immunology lab that they're doing, but I'm pretty sure they farm those out to academia, because academia is just better equipped to do those kinds of studies. Animal studies where you have the IACUC, the boards that specifically regulate the safety, and the morality of animal studies, or cell studies as well, under IRBs. But at NASA, we have kind of two mechanisms for human safety. We do have an IRB, an internal review board, that looks at the kind of the sanctity of our science. But then we also have a different mechanism called a test readiness review board. And the TRR is going to actually look at the safety from an engineering standpoint. And those boards are run by engineers. And you really got to know your stuff to get past these folks. And so you have to clear a lot of hurdles to do human research at NASA. And then if you want to do it with crew, it's even harder, because our crew are few and far between and their time is very valuable, very valuable. So that's an even bigger hurdle to go over. So oftentimes we will have crew-like human subjects. And when I do my air quotes, what I mean is within the same age bracket, within the same fitness bracket, there are anthropometrics that they need to meet. And so we try to get as close as possible to somebody who could be a crew. And that even goes as far as education. You have to have at least a master's degree to be considered a crew-like subject. And you have to pass a series of physicals. And I'm going through that right now, actually, to be a suited test subject. So there's a series of things you got to do and exposures to high altitude and things like that you got to go do if you want to be able to get into a suit and be a suited test subject. And so the pool of those people is also very small, but they're at least more flexible than our crew, and you don't have to go through quite as many hurdles to get them to help you with a study. Yeah, it's very, very specific. So if you're listening and you want to do NASA stuff, just know that there's the community of people who do this is very small, and everybody knows each other. Chances are, if you've been around for a while, I haven't been around long enough to know everybody yet. But there's only a couple of conferences, and you're going to meet everybody in pretty short order. You're going to know where kind of the centers of gravity, if you'll forgive the pun, around the world are for doing human spaceflight research. There's just a handful, and pretty quickly you're going to know who those people are, and you better not burn any bridges because the word gets around. So, but generally, everybody truly is wonderful. Everybody kind of has the same eye on the prize. And so, I mean, once you're in, it's a small world, and you get to see everybody, at these conferences year after year. And it's a really cool community to be a part of.
That sounds great. I had no idea you could be one of those subjects. I'm definitely not in shape, but Joe, maybe you might want to apply for that.
I'm way too tall. Well, not way too tall, but I think I'm too tall.
How tall are you?
6'1".
Yeah, you're not too tall.
Really? I thought I read that you had to be like 5'10" or under. Okay.
No.
There's a chance.
There's anthros, but 6'1" is fine.
Okay. For crew though?
Yep.
Nice.
We got some 6'1" astronauts.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Really cool.
No, I don't think you can be like 6'5". I think the limit is maybe 6'4". I don't think you can be 6'4".
Wow.
I could be wrong, but it's around there. It's around like 4, 6'5". You can't be any taller than that. You don't fit.
That's really, really cool. And I guess off the top of your head, if somebody, student or somebody who's interested in getting into this network as a early career scientist, what comes to mind as far as like, this is, if you go to one conference, which one's the one to go to?
That's tough. Generally, prior to the last month, I would have said the Human Research Programs conference in Galveston, because I think it's free for students, and it's a very easy conference to get into. It's not real strenuous. They don't go to exotic places. They go to Galveston, which is an easy flight from anywhere, to reach. You fly into Houston, and it's a 30-minute drive to get to Galveston. So it's not hard. So I would have said that. But right now, that's kind of a little bit in flux. Because the Human Research Program is one of the NASA programs, and there's a bunch of programs. And so they're federally funded. And so with the whole budget stuff that's going on right now, for anybody listening in the future, we're in October 2025, and the government has shut down in the last week. And so nobody really knows what's happening. They generally do this conference in February, like late January, early February, every calendar year. So there's just a lot of uncertainty around it right now. So we don't know what that's going to look like moving forward. But so far, and I've gone to that conference about the last 6 years in a row, that's where I meet the most people. That's where I just get inundated with the most science. And you just get fully immersed in human spaceflight all day, every day for like 4 days. And it's wonderful. And everybody that I've met, that's related to my career, I met there, especially because, like I was saying earlier, NASA Johnson Space Center is here in Houston, and all the people that work in human spaceflight are already here. So we don't even have to travel for that. So you're going to get all the people that work at NASA at that conference. The next best one I would say is the Aerospace Medical Association, ASMA. So they travel around. Their last one was in Atlanta. I think the next one is in Montana in 2026. I may be thinking the last one. But anyway, the last one was in Atlanta. But it's generally in the U.S., so that's also not a difficult one to get in. Some of these other conferences, they go to like Dubai, and stuff like that. And that's way difficult for students to get to that are interested in being a part of it. The ones in the US, that's where a lot of us contractors get to go to. That's where a lot of people, it's just more affordable. And so you're going to get more opportunities to make network connections. And the fact of the matter is, like it or not, real life is run by your network connections. Your career prospects are determined more by your network connections than your qualifications. That's just reality, in my opinion. And so you got to get out there, good at it, but you do have to do it. Just go out there, make some friends, talk to people who are standing at their posters, ask them questions. And if you like what they're doing, introduce yourself and give them your email address, or give them your LinkedIn or something like that. You can't just passively wait for the jobs to come to you. You got to go get them. So I would say, to summarize, the Human Research Programs Investigator Workshop in Galveston and the Asthma Medical Conference.
Thanks for sharing that.
Joe, did you find that to be true as well? Like when you were looking for career prospects, when you were looking for your next step, did you find it like you had to go to conferences or you met those connections at conferences or even your peers?
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, I had an undergraduate mentor who even suggested that we go without funding. So I actually paid my way to a national American College of Sports Medicine meeting, which at the time was sort of crazy. I mean, based on the tuition I was paying, it was probably half of a semester of tuition, but it was definitely well worth it to make the connections. So I definitely try to tell my students that conferences and presenting, meeting people, that's where I've met every mentor that I've had and a lot of peers.
Does your department offer travel scholarships to your students?
They do. They actually get quite a bit of travel right now, and then I did as well as a student at Delaware. Unfortunately, things get more and more expensive, but
so important, just vital.
Yeah.
Getting to those conferences, getting an abstract in. It's not necessarily about the science you're presenting. It's about being able to walk around to other people at posters, and people who are speakers, people who are listening to the speakers that ask questions, finding out who these people are and going and introducing yourself. It's scary. I'm a pretty introverted person, and I don't like it, but it's necessary. Like I wouldn't be here if I didn't do that.
Yeah, you had mentioned some folks at A&M that sort of connected you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that journey, I guess? So presumably there were some people working with NASA or NASA contractors.
Yep. So my journey into human spaceflight began and I knew nothing other than I just wanted to do research on getting people into space. And so I looked up NASA research and the Human Research Program came up. And I didn't mess around. I said, okay, who runs the Human Research Program? The guy's name was John Charles. And John Charles, turns out, had an active Twitter account at the time. It was still Twitter. This was 2017. And he was tweeting. And I had sent him a DM. And I said, hey, I'm a teacher in Texas. And I'm looking at any school in Texas where I can get a PhD and get into, actually, I didn't know if I wanted a master's or a PhD at that point. What do I need? And if I want to, a seat at the table to have a hand in what research gets done, and what that looks like, then what do I need to do? And he actually answered me, thank God. And he actually took the time and he answered me, and that began an email back and forth. And so he got me connected to Sue Bloomfield at Texas A&M, who connected me to several other people at Texas A&M. And that kind of kicked off the journey. While I was at A&M, I actually ended up transferring. My first lab I was a part of did animal studies. And the first time I went to that Human Research Program Investigator Workshop that I just told you about, I realized nobody's doing animal studies at NASA. They're doing human studies, and then they're farming out the animal studies to universities. But I want to work at NASA. So I said, I need to go to a different lab then. And so it was actually our department head at the time who connected me to a brand new faculty member over in aerospace, the aerospace department, which, bear in mind, I'm in the kinesiology department. And her name is Ana Diaz Artiles, and she's a Spanish woman who came to the United States and got her PhD at MIT and did a postdoc at Cornell, and then was a brand new faculty there at Texas A&M, joined the same time I did. The department head connected me to her, and it was great. She was doing exactly the human performance research that I wanted to do, but she was in the aerospace department, and I am not an aerospace student. And she said, well, can you pass the aerospace qualification exam? And I said, no, I cannot. That is very hard. I have absolutely no training in aerospace. And I'm talking not humans in aerospace environments. No. This is actual like airframes and dynamics. And I was like, there's no way. My entire background is human physiology. And so there was some gnashing of teeth about that. But, God bless her. She was willing to put herself out there and get a dual appointment to the kinesiology department so that she could be the chair on my committee. And I'm eternally grateful to her for that. Ana Diaz-Artiles over at Texas A&M Aerospace Department, wonderful, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And my whole trajectory, my whole graduate school trajectory changed because I then had a great fit as an advisor. So the previous advisor, many students have come from his lab, but he and I just were not a great fit. But the new advisor, Anna, was a phenomenal advisor, a great fit for me. She knew exactly the people I needed to talk to, the kind of research I needed to do, and to her credit, like gave me a chance. And so she gave me a couple of, like, a little easy project at first just to see if I was an idiot, and then gave me a kind of a bigger project and let me do that and write it up and publish it. And then at that point we were off to the races, and that all culminated. We did a parabolic flight in my last year at A&M. That was the last project that I was a part of. And we actually just got that paper accepted now 2 years later. And that's the parabolic flight where you go in zero gravity. If you haven't seen these, that's where you go way up and then you fall out of the sky. And there's really no difference physiologically between falling and being in space. Being in space is just perpetually falling. And so, you can fall in an airplane for about 20 seconds before you can't really pull out of it anymore, especially in those big airplanes. So you fall for 20 seconds and then they pull you out and then you go back up and you do that 30 times. They call it the vomit comment for reasons. It got me. Even they give you drugs at the start of these things to keep you from throwing up, but it got me. But anyway, so that, couldn't have asked for a better experience. And so I really, of course, I credit my cohort within my department, for helping me navigate the ways of A&M. Credit goes to my advisor. It's so important, so critical. It's really the most important decision you're going to make in your graduate school journey is who your advisor is, and making sure that that's a good fit for what you want to do, when you leave. And as well, some of the other faculty in the department as well, who, helped me, through the transition and stuff and introduced me to folks. It's really takes a lot of people. If you're willing to put yourself out there and be upfront with needing help and where you're trying to go, I think generally the faculty want to help you, but you do kind of have to be forthright with what you need, and they will usually help you. Usually.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I hear a lot of different things there as far as mentorship being important, a
Yeah.
little bit of luck and timing maybe with
Yep.
alignment.
For
And then I'm
sure.
also curious to get your perspectives on if you think coming from an advisor without presumably a large kinesiology background, were there types of things that you did in the lab or the people that you spend time with in the aerospace side where you think you took some skills, mental
Absolutely.
models, or different
Oh
abilities
yeah.
and sort of translated over? And what types
100%.
of things
Yeah.
do you think were most important?
And frankly, I wouldn't have got the job I did if I hadn't. If I had stayed in kinesiology, even if I had, let's say, so for example, I was originally going to be a part of Sue Bloomfield's lab doing bone science, and that would have been a great, PhD, but she was retiring. And so that door closed. And so, like you said, there's a little bit of serendipity to the whole thing. So I think if I had stayed in kinesiology, I would not have gotten not just some of the aerospace medicine exposure, but specifically systems engineering. So I also had an opportunity to sit in on and then later to be a grad assistant for a systems engineering course. And so much of what we do at NASA turns out to be systems engineering, and I had no idea what that is. So that's just the engineering of systems, just projects and how you kind of get through a design of a thing that you need to make, who your stakeholders are, and just the whole process of reviews and all of that. That is a very systematic thing that is taught in engineering courses, and that as a kinesiology, I don't want to say major, but as a kinesiology student, I would not have been exposed to it all, and I think that would have actually been a loss on my part to not get that, and I didn't even know I needed it until I got there, and it turned out to be extremely important.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned the serendipity. It seems that a lot of times, and you sort of also had, so you had the benefit of both. So you both knew what you wanted to do and how to
Yes,
get there, and then you
yes.
also had the serendipity. So it was sort of the alignment of
I'm
both
very
both
grateful, and
things.
I make no bones about it. There was an element of serendipity to it, and answered prayer, whatever you want to call it. But it was a really great opportunity. And on my side, I also had to make the best of that opportunity. You got to recognize that opportunity that was given to me, and also to make sure that I give it 100%. And that's because that's what it took. Couldn't take anything less than 100%. I wouldn't have made it. It took every bit of everything I had to kind of make the best case that I could. And so I'm definitely here through some amount of serendipity, but I also don't want to undersell a lot of hard work.
I believe it. I mean, in aerospace, even taking some of those courses seems a PhD is hard enough on its own, let alone having to sort of
Yeah.
sub-minor in engineering.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's really what it ended up being was taking from the time I changed labs, I was in at least one aerospace course every semester. And so it really almost ended up being a 50-50 kind of a physiology background, but then a kind of an aerospace medicine set of courses as well. And really like human factors in aerospace environments, and whether it be, airplanes and helicopters or, space shuttles or spacecraft, which is what I was really interested in. But all of those courses kind of bundle all those things together. So I got a pretty good exposure to a lot of that stuff.
Very good. Jorge, looks like you might have a question.
Yeah. One thing I wanna say is shout out to Dr. Sue Bloomfield. She's actually, I don't know
Yeah.
if I ever told you this, Nathan, but the reason I went to A&M is because of her. Going back
It's
to
awesome.
the encouragement of going to conferences and presenting. I was presenting some of my bachelor's work. I don't know if they still have it around, but it's called the Pathways Fellowship to the Doctorate
It's
Conference.
not
So
around. No, I'm sorry. It is around.
it's
NASA
still around.
Pathways is still around, for
Yeah,
sure.
and so I went to present research on some resistance training work that I had been doing. But the biggest thing is that I had the opportunity to network, and I met Dr. Bloomfield, and she encouraged me to apply to this fellowship. But anyway, this is not about me, but just wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Bloomfield for
Absolutely.
bringing me to A&M. Talking about back what Joe was mentioning with the mentorship. How early in your career, like when should you start thinking about this is the mentor I want to work with? This is the PI that I want to work with. How early should somebody be looking
As soon as
into that?
possible. And at the same time, early on, if you get the impression that your advisor is not in your court, you know, and interested in your success, as quick as you can, find somebody who is. Unless, well, no, I wouldn't even qualify it. If your advisor isn't in your court, you need to find somebody who is. And there are some bad ones out there. There's lots of stories that are told about bad ones. I don't know that they set out to be to be bad ones, but I think that different faculties at different stages of their careers just have different priorities, and for some of them, the students are just not their main priority anymore, and or maybe they've settled on some beliefs that aren't conducive to your success anymore. But I have seen way more great advisors than bad ones, and it's I just, again, I can't undersell it. It really is by far the most important decision that you're going to make. And so as soon as you can, if you're in your undergrad or in a master's program and you find somebody that you can connect with, on the faculty, and they have a space for you to do a PhD, I would say the last thing you need there is kind of a goal for why you want a PhD specifically. Because if you don't absolutely need one to do the job that you want, don't do it. Just stick with your master's and just start in the field, because if you're not trying to do something that needs a PhD, then don't bother. I would say it's more valuable to your career to start working than to spend the next 5 or 6 years still in school if you're in your early 20s. You can always, I'm a living testament to the fact that you can go back to it. And I think you're better served actually by spending some time working in a job with other adults, and seeing what that's like, rather than just going the whole way through from 18 to 26, 28, or however old, people are when they get done with their PhD these days. Just do some work first, spend a few years out in the workforce, and then decide, if it's really necessary before you pull that trigger. But sorry, I digress there a little bit. But
No, that's good.
I think the real important thing is the advisor is the single most important decision that you're going to make in grad school. It's more important than even the field that you're in, because you can be in the right field with the wrong advisor and you won't finish, you won't succeed. But you can be in the wrong field with the right advisor and you can figure out how to kind of parlay your way over into something into the right field later, once you have somebody in your court that can help you do that. Yeah, just find somebody that you can connect with, and that's a good fit for you. I think that's the most important thing, as early as possible.
How does one go about finding who is going to be a good fit? Should I go and talk to, if I was a student, should I go and talk to other PhDs from the lab? Should
Yeah.
I try
Yeah.
to get an interview with the PI? I mean, like what is the
That's
best resource for that?
I think both. You're going to have to get your foot in the door somehow, and you're going to have to, make an introduction. So you're going to have to do the scary thing and walking up to them and introducing yourself and, or sending an email. But ideally, really, I mean this, ideally go in person and just shake their hand and look them in the eye, and don't just rely. These faculty get 3,000 emails a day, and at least 100 of them are from some student wanting something from them. And if you can go in and just be a face that they can connect, your odds go up tremendously. They just skyrocket of success. And, you can get a meeting with them. And I would just say, if they don't introduce you to their students, that's probably not a good sign. You should have some opportunity in some tour of the lab to meet the students and talk to them without the faculty member there. That's very valuable to you, because they're hopefully those students are going to shoot you straight and let you know what the actual, there's an interesting, again, like, you just got to know what the incentives are, in a situation. And so those students, the faculty member is incentivized to keep bringing in, that's their job, is to bring in students, but also they need people to do the work on the grants that they're doing. And you're always gonna need more people, because your workforce keeps graduating and leaving and going off and doing other things. So you got to be able to backfill. And so it's just you just got to understand that incentive. But the students, on the other hand, again, just understanding the incentives is they probably would love to have your help, or they might be on your side and might tell you want to go anywhere other than here. They might give you that heads up. I've heard of students doing that very thing. And so I would talk to them and trust the word that you get from there. But also at the end of the day, you got to trust your instincts and go with that. And just make the best decision you can. And just remember, nothing is set in stone. If you make the wrong decision, you can always pivot. And that's what I did. And I've known many people that did the same thing. You can always change if it's not a good fit. It's still a good experience. You can still learn something from it, and you can go on to something that is a better fit and be better served by doing that, rather than trying to stick it out of some misplaced sense of loyalty. At the end of the day, you've got to do what's right for your career. So don't be scared to pivot if you have to.
I can attest to that, because I ended up switching labs myself after I went to applied, and then I went to basic science working with animal models, because that's what I ultimately wanted to do. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's something that's not talked about as much as it should be, because there's kind of a stigma behind, like, oh, well, like you said, the sense of loyalty, right? And so now, going back to what you mentioned earlier about your advice of, hey, maybe you don't have to go into the PhD program right away. Maybe, go into the workforce and figure out what you want. Do you feel like that was a big contributor into knowing I want to work for NASA? Because you were out
Yes.
In the workforce before coming back in. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was always interested in physiology itself. I got a high school football injury. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, and that was my first exposure to the world of medicine and the human body and the inner workings of the human body. And that was my junior year of high school. And I went into sports medicine and athletic training at TCU, and that's where I got my undergrad. And so I spent, basically from about 17 until about 23 in sports medicine and working in that field. And then I became a personal trainer and became interested because I was more interested, I realized, in performance than I was in necessarily medicine at that point. And so I spent about 10 years doing that. And then I spent about 6 years teaching, because, so it's okay to pivot. It's okay to follow your heart and do what you love. There's a certain lifestyle that comes with doing kind of human performance, that type of work where you're making commissions. And so you got to eat what you kill. And so you're always hustling. And at the same time that I was doing that, I also had a business. I had a portable laser tag event business that I ran and had employees. And that's another, you eat what you kill, and you're just constantly just hustling. And I just realized at that point, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the kind of person that cold calls and, remembers people's names and their birthdays and calls them and, all that kind of stuff for all my different vendors and employees. I'm just not good at that. And I kind of had to fall on my face a little bit to realize that, and struggle a little bit. And that's when I became a teacher, and I loved it. And I could have done that for the rest of my life. But I was just at a point, 2017, 2018, where I said, if I could do this forever, but to get back to origin stories, I would teach every spring semester to my students a little bit about space. It was part of the physics curriculum. It was just a little bit on orbits. That was kind of built into that orbital mechanics. And I just felt like that wasn't enough. I wanted to give them the whole, these are the planets. This is just all the cool things that I just personally found cool about space. And so I actually dedicated a week to that. No homework, just here's cool space stuff for a week to all my physics students. This is my gift to you. And every year I would have students come up to me and be like, Mr. Keller, I've never seen you teach like that. Like you just had so much energy and it was just so fun. And I've just, nobody's ever explained that to me before. And I was like, man, wonder if I can go work at NASA. What does that look like? And so that began the series of questions of, what does that look like? Where do I go? And that's when I reached out to John Charles. John Charles has since passed away. He passed away during my program, right before I proposed my thesis, unfortunately. Yeah. But I do credit him for kicking the whole thing off. And I strive to be that kind of connection to people as well, to always recognize, especially when it's a student or a young person, with a question, that I might be the bridge. I might be the connection that they needed to get from just some nebulous idea in their head of what they want to do to something very discrete and concrete and attainable to them, and connecting them. And that I could be that person. You never know. And so you just have to be aware of that. And I take that very seriously. And I'm very grateful that somebody did that for me.
Thank you for sharing that. If somebody wants to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you? And we'll put that on the show notes as well. But
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest thing. I have a NASA email as well, but probably LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me. I'm on there with my stupid face. I'm on the parabolic flight. I'm kind of flying around in the blue jumpsuit.
That's really cool.
That'll be my profile picture. Until I'm in a spacesuit. Once I'm in a spacesuit, then that'll be the profile picture.
Nice. Very nice.
Listening to this in the future, might be a spacesuit.
There we go. That's really cool. Joe, do you have any other follow-up questions on that? Yeah, I have a few notes here. One of the things that you mentioned that I actually really overlooked, but I did find it quite critical. So it's interesting that you bring that up as sort of what drove your passion. And I'm sure there might have been some thoughts in your head, but you sort of described it as if other people were telling you what your passion is. Mm-hmm. And just thinking about when I was looking for, my quarter life crisis of what I want to do with my career, what job do I want? I was reading all these books, and I think it was Next Gen PhD, and it had a section about evaluating yourself and then a section about having others evaluate you. And it felt very weird, but I sort of went around to the 10 people who I worked with every day and said, hey,
what a great idea.
What are the types of things that I seem like I like to do? What are some things that I don't seem like I like to do?
Love this.
It was always so interesting hearing what other people said. I think mostly it sort of aligned with what I thought, but there'd be some really weird things, and I can't think of any examples offhand, but just like they would say that, I'm like, really? I really don't look like I enjoy that? Like, no, not at all. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I need to do a better job with that. Or they're like, yeah, you really love this. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think I do. So I think just for anybody considering different careers, I found that pretty valuable. And just think about how helpful it was for you and how much it guided you. I think that is a useful exercise because your mind has these preconceived notions of the things that you enjoy, but actually others may actually have a good
assessment. That's how I became
assessment.
a teacher too. The same exact thing was teaching at my church. I was teaching lessons for Sunday school, for folks, and they were like, you're really good at this and have a knack for making things simple that I've never thought about before. And I thought, well, maybe I can turn that into a career. I started part-time, just doing substitute and just trying it out, and I loved it. So you're exactly right. I think occasionally some people can help you find your way. The things that make you light up, you can follow those things. That's okay.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. I read a book, same as you, a kind of quarter life crisis type of thing, and it was called Waking the Dead, and it was about kind of the same thing. Like you're people who are just, because I was feeling at the time like I was just kind of in a rut, didn't know what I was doing, didn't have a path forward. And the point that they made was that you can start with what you want to do, and then you can look at what are you good at, and that's 2 points in a line. And then if you can look, the next point out in that line is what you're meant to do. And so if you can connect what you love to what you're good at, start with that, and then see if you can turn that into something else, a third point farther out? Is there some way that you can make a living doing that thing? And then you can be happy doing it. And so that's why I became a teacher. And like I said, I love doing it. I could have done that the rest of my life. I'd love at some point to go back to teaching in some capacity, maybe as a science educator or something like that. That'd be wonderful. I love think about something for the first time and it just dawned on them, like making the connections and seeing, oh, it works like this, and them getting excited about it. That gets me excited about it. And so I try to draw leave the little breadcrumbs and just see if they can follow that and discover it for themselves. And that's just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that must be really rewarding. And I can definitely agree with when you see those connections light up. That's definitely one of the best parts of teaching and mentoring.
I love that. And when you can get people excited about the things that you're excited about, that's great. That's the best. That's why you do it.
Yeah, Jorge?
Yeah, I was just saying the way you were describing connecting those dots from, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and how can you make a living off of that, right? What can you contribute to society? The Japanese have a concept called ikigai, and basically you just described it with what you were saying.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, so if you want to look at that. So
I bet that's it's got to just be a common human experience, right? It's got to be.
Yeah.
But you don't think about it until somebody points it out to you. It's just one of those life things, right? Like the importance of communication or relationships are the most important thing. Until somebody points it out to you, you don't think about, oh, yeah, you're kind of right. And I think your early 20s are a good time to discover all that, or at least some of that to different degrees, depending on the person. But that's a good time to do that. And again, that's why I just think that if I was the emperor and I could pull some levers, I would say you are not allowed to go all the way through a PhD. You'd end at the master's, you go out, you do some work, then you come back, you do the PhD. Once you've worked in the field you want the PhD in, because I think that's a much better foundation, because you can then speak from a much more informed place of what it's actually like to do that. And there's going to be exceptions to that depending on what you're actually doing, for your, with your PhD. But certainly I think in an engineering capacity, anything like that, you are really well served by going out, knowing a little bit about how it actually works. I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd had a master's and I could go work in human spaceflight for a little while and then go back and get a PhD in it and then go back, being equipped with something in each hand that way, I think would have been a great experience. And so that's what I tell our NASA Pathways interns that you mentioned. We get those interns in, and that's what I tell them. You do work for a couple of years. It's fine.
That's a really good piece of advice. And I mean, you kind of beat me to the next question I was going to have is like, what would you recommend doing, or what would you have done if you were to redo your PhD? I had a similar experience. I did all kinds of different jobs. I was a car salesman. Realized I hated. I'm good at it.
Sales.
But yeah, but I couldn't do it, right? And so this is probably a piece of advice I have is don't see those things that like, oh, I didn't like that as a failure, but more as a learning experience.
No.
You're gathering data on what you like and what you don't like, right? And that was, one of the conversations that Joe and I had previously as to why I decided to go into industry as opposed to staying in academia is that I did not enjoy grant writing. I love the science. I love teaching. I love it. But it was like almost pulling teeth doing grant writing. So I decided to go.
Critical skill. In fact, I would say something number one skill.
Exactly. So yeah, that is something that if you're listening to this, it does not make you a failure to switch, but you're gathering data on what you enjoy and what you don't.
Yeah.
And
agree completely.
But those grant writing skills, I still take them and I use them on a lot of the other things that I do right now. So
still going to be useful.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, if you have, I guess, one last piece of advice, what would it be? Something that you haven't mentioned yet?
Well, you just kind of touched on it, and I think Joe can speak to this too. I feel like there are some skills. If you're a grad student and you're a new PhD student, there's some skills that they don't teach you, I think, quick enough to be really helpful to you. And the first one is grant writing. Get into a grant writing class, get into a symposium, get into a workshop, get into as many things as you possibly can to improve the quality of your writing. The unfortunate reality is that you have never been prepared to write like this. To write a grant is different, and to write a scientific paper is different. And it's different than all the prose writing that you've done your whole life up to that point. It's just a different kind of thing, and get a book, get something. But being able to write grants is such a critical skill that I think is not emphasized, or at least wasn't emphasized enough in my experience. And it is an absolutely vital and critical skill. So get into those workshops as soon as you can. I would say the other side of the same coin for like new investigators is managing your money and the grants that you do get. And I think that's another thing that they don't have enough classes on. And again, I can only speak to my own experience and the experience of a few other people that I've talked to. I think there's how you manage and I'm not talking about just keeping it in the black as opposed to in the red, although that is important. I'm talking about that there's different buckets of money that you have access to. And depending on your department and the school and all that you're a part of, they will have different rules about that. So I just think as quick as you can in your PhD experience, maybe go sit down with a department head or somebody like that and buy their lunch and, or bring them your ramen noodles or whatever you can afford. But really, like, ask them, how does the money work? Ask them about indirects. You probably never heard of indirects. I didn't until I was well into my program. And I just think you are so well served to understand the money, because the fact of the matter is the other things that you have to do, the science you have to do, the students you are training, the classes, all of that kind of needs a scaffolding of money around it. And you are responsible for that. And unfortunately, I feel like that skill is not emphasized enough. The other skills, I would say, certainly mentorship is a skill, teaching is a skill. These are things that I don't think are emphasized enough, that I think new faculty are really on the hook for. I wish every faculty member had to take a teaching class. As somebody who had to take teaching classes and really benefited from them, I wish that every faculty member that has to teach would take some teaching classes on how to teach. I think every graduate program would be well served by mandating, grant writing, how to manage your money, how to be a mentor, how to be a teacher. Those are some skills that you need, along with all that stuff that you're learning about statistics and science and all those nitty-gritty things and courses that you're taking that are very important, but will not allow you to keep your job. They might get you a job, but they won't make you good at your job. These other things I'm mentioning will make you good at your job. And I think most departments have lots of workshops and opportunities as a new faculty member, but by then I feel like you're already kind of in the deep end, and it's a little late to be trying to get caught up on those things now. So I would say that would be my piece of advice for somebody new in their program, or even in their program, even late in your program. Just know, like, your success and failure are often determined by things that you were not trained to do in your graduate program. Oh, and the last one, and I think Dr. Lightfoot would agree with me, the most important skill is your people skills. Nobody's going to keep you around if you're just burning bridges and making them feel bad every time they come and talk to you. So if you if you need to clean yourself up a little bit and clean up the way you talk to people, that's probably a good idea to do. Making friends is better than making enemies. So I think your soft people skills are also pretty high up there. And again, just something that you have to be intentional about going and getting better at. That's my advice. What do you think, Joe? You agree with that?
Yeah, those are some amazing insights. I don't know if I have a good follow-up question with all that, because there's so much I agree with. Just to pull on, I guess, two strings that I heard about with budgets. I mean, we forget that everything is a business too, and obviously there's values and goals and missions for every entity, but ultimately, as you alluded to, the money makes everything work. So understanding sub-budgets, for example, I have, 8 or 9 budget codes that I can use for various things, but I can't buy, X with one account. I can't pay for a person of this type with this account. So I think it's tough because there's always a little bit of not so much of a secrecy, but some confidentiality. But I would definitely agree. I try to be as transparent as I can be, as far as here's some buckets of money and here's what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do.
Exactly.
And then the other thing that I sort of came to mind was, along with communication, I think writing in general, especially grant writing, sort of basically you have to prove to yourself that you have the logic down and you understand a subject enough. And I actually noticed this early on when a student would say, let's come meet, I want to talk about this idea. If I just ask them, hey, just write a few sentences about actually what you want to try to accomplish, it really forces them. All of a sudden they think, oh, of course I could write this in 2 sentences. And then a week or two goes by and they say, oh, I went down that rabbit hole.
That's the hardest thing.
Looked at 50 abstracts, and it turns out but it just forces you to lay out,
So much better.
problem, step 2,
Yeah.
step 3, potential solution, why it could work, why it couldn't work. And just
Such a
having to go
great
through that
skill.
process is all
Critical
the
skill.
learning. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been, 3 days deep into an idea that I was cooking, and then I just realized, oh, this just isn't gonna work. And I was so excited about it. But you just that's why you do your due diligence and all that, and that's what goes into it. And also you're exactly right. I think it clarifies your message. It makes you a better writer. Just overall, just being able to arrive at a clear, concise message is a heck of a skill to have as a writer.
Yeah. And while we're on this point, what I tell my students is when giving a talk, as far as whether it's a proposal or presentation of any kind, the mindset that we try to do with the logic is you want to build it and make it so concrete that the goal is when you advance to this is the purpose of our study slide, you should be able to have the audience and pick anybody out at random, and they should be able to tell you exactly what you're going to say because you've led them step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 is unknown. And then boom, everybody should be sort of looped
That's
along
what
with
we're
everything.
doing.
Yeah.
One last thing, Nathan, if you don't mind, going back to, I know you mentioned your lab. How many other labs are in that, work with NASA?
So many. Yeah. So many. And so just in biomedical research, I believe there's 7. It depends on where you draw the lines. And it's there's, oh gosh, I can't even name them all.
That's okay.
So we do the spacewalks, and we do the environmental science, everything related to like getting the bends. You've probably heard of the bends when you come up from a scuba dive.
Okay. Yeah.
The same thing happens when you go up to space because you're decreasing the pressure that's on a person. So we study that, but in altitude. But there's other labs that do like exercise and physical performance. There's an anthropometry and injury biomechanics lab. There's an immunology lab. There's a cell biology lab. There's another like environmental chemistry type lab where they kind of dial up the mixtures and stuff that go into various things. And so I think, and there's one more. It's escaped my brain. I apologize now. But that's just the biomedical research side. But then there's all the other things. So for example, there's the analogs. So we have the Human Exploration Research Analog, HERA, where we put 4 people in a can. It's like a little 3-story can, but it's just a normal pressure and stuff like that. But they're in there for like 6 weeks at a time. Then we've got, or 3 months, I believe, up to 3 months at a time. I think is what they're doing now is 3-month campaigns where they're just locked in there, and we just treat them like they're going to Mars. And so you get like these long communication delays back to mission control and stuff. They have a whole simulated mission control of people that are talking to these 4 crew members that are locked in this thing. We also have CHIPEA, and I can't remember the whole acronym, but it's a year-long Martian analog where they 3D printed a Martian habitat. And this is at Johnson Space Center. And it's a little 1-story building that they actually 3D printed out of simulated Martian soil. The idea is that we would send a vehicle to make this whole thing for the crew, and then they would show up and land and populate it. So there's 4 people that are in this thing for a year to simulate a Martian mission, and we're just about to kick off campaign 2. We've already done campaign 1, so we had 4 folks in there last year and a little bit of the year before that, and now we're about to do it again. So there's all kinds of science that's being done on that, all kinds of people. As I said before, they're also like leveraging a lot of academia. So that happens all the time, as well as like military, industrial folks that come in. It just depends on the application and what exactly and who exactly is interested in it. So there are ways, if you're not literally working on site at NASA, that you can still get there. In fact, Texas A&M is building a whole facility right there at Johnson.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole space institute. Yep, the A&M Space Institute that's being built. Yep, can't get it anywhere else. So it's huge. It's a massive thing.
Go Aggies.
So the state of Texas decided to invest, I believe it was $160 million. I think is the number, 150, $160 million into building a facility because they said, we want to keep human spaceflight right here in the state of Texas. So I was hopeful that one day we get to go to somewhere nice like Colorado, but nope, we're staying right here in Houston in the swamp.
That's amazing. Wow. No, so I guess the big takeaway is that there are so many opportunities out there, and I am assuming that, you don't have to have a PhD or something like that. There's other degrees and the sciences that will allow you to do that, right? So now you had the opportunity, and you mentioned your picture on LinkedIn earlier. Tell us a really quick note on that. How did you get, because you had the opportunity to travel outside of...
Go to France?
That's what it was, right?
Yeah, for the parabolic flight. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a
I mean,
little
so
bit
that
about
was all because of my advisor. So she got that grant, and she won that and was awarded that. And so what we were looking at specifically was during gravity transitions, when you're having to be a pilot and essentially either land on the surface of the moon or land on the surface of Mars, is that going to affect your ability, as a pilot to navigate and do some of these fine motor skill maneuvers? We were looking at fine motor skills in gravity transitions and in zero gravity. And so it was a very, very difficult protocol. We had 4 people. We were constantly shipped. There were 4 other investigative teams that were on the plane with us at the same time. We had 16 subjects, 4 at a time. And so we would do a parabola and then we'd switch, and, everybody would get in and out of the chairs, and we'd plug everybody back, strap them all back in, and then we'd climb again, and then we'd fall out of the sky, and then we'd level back out and do it all over again. It was a lot. We had to have multiple laptops set up. We had chairs, the whole thing. It was about a year in prep for the whole thing. And then it's amazing because it's just all done in a couple of days. You do 1 flight a day at different gravity levels. So we did like 0G, which is just falling out of the sky. You can do 3/4 gravity of 3/4 Earth gravity, which is kind of barely falling out of the sky, just falling at a really rapid rate, but not just free falling. G, and then flat, we would do baselines just on the ground with 1G to see their performance on it. So these were very specific bimanual coordination types of tasks that have been very, very thoroughly studied. So we actually had a bimanual coordination expert that was on. It was a co-I on the team, and so it was a really great way to see how you can get people who have very, very specific, not even spaceflight related expertise, and bring them in and leverage that expertise into answering a very operational type of question, a very specific operational type question, because that was an unknown. If you're in the middle of this gravity transition, can you, especially something really strong, like say microgravity to Martian gravity, how much does that affect your ability to pilot a lander? And so that was something that was not known, and now we know. And so it's very interesting. So the long and the short of it is that there are small changes, but probably not enough to affect a lander depending on how it's set up, but just to be aware that there are, once you suddenly go from no gravity to gravity, you're expecting your arm to not weigh anything, but now it weighs something. And if you're actuating very small things, you kind of need to take that into account. But the effect is pretty quick. Your body's really, really good at adapting to real-time feedback. So if you can have some kind of real-time feedback that's showing you're messing up, that is pretty protective of that kind of an effect.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You kind of give us the gist of it. We would love to have you back to talk about the actual research and the science of the physiology in itself. And we can talk about that, the particular paper that you said it's under review, or any of the other stuff that you're able to share.
No, it was accepted. So it's about to be published. That paper is about to be published. So you can look for that. Just look for Ana Diaz Artiles and look for her name on Google Scholar. Certainly she's going to be on there. My name's in there too.
Okay. Before we part ways, do you have any last questions or comments?
No questions, but yeah, just really appreciate you sharing the insight. And you've had a very interesting kind of journey, but also shared a lot of really interesting points about communication and the skills, and a little bit of serendipity, but also going after what you want. So just thanks for coming on and sharing that.
Absolutely. I kind of live by this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'll give you the abbreviated version. He said, "It's never too late, or indeed never too early, to do exactly what you want to do." So, whoever you are, however old you are, it's never too late and it's never too early. You can start pursuing what it is, that makes you come alive and makes you happy, and figure out what you're good at. And if you compare those two things together, you'll probably point you in a direction at what it is that you need to be doing with your life.
Love it. Love that quote. And with that inspirational quote there, we will wrap up our episode with Dr. Nathan Keller, another episode of Physiology Unraveled, the Career Series. Thank you again, Nathan and Joe. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.